Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents Wisconsin's 2nd District in the House of Representatives. Pocan.house.gov is the website, and Rep. Mark Pocan is his Twitter handle. And Michael in Bronx, New York, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom, and hello, Congressman. I need to raise two issues regarding what happened in Vegas. Number one, I find that the NRA is not a gun lobby these days, but to be racist terrorists because they claim to be standing up for the Second Amendment and people having Second Amendment rights, but I did not hear one peep out of them when it came to the case of Philando Castile, who was killed by police in an open carry state. He told the cop that he has a gun and he's a licensed registered gun owner. He was producing identification, word by word, complying with the cop and telling him what he's doing, and the cop still fatally shot him. There was no peep out of NRA defending Mr. Castile's Second Amendment rights. So it begs the question as to where do the NRA stand. And furthermore, with this idea of the Second Amendment linked to guns, I thought about this carefully, and I honestly think the Second Amendment stands for something else. It says the right to bear arms under a well-regulated militia. And a well-regulated militia, first of all, has to be trained, and they have to be pretty much uniformed. These people that are holding guns, there's no training whatsoever. There's no lecture. There's no education.
Michael, let's let the congressman comment on this. It's a pretty good rant there. Thank you, Congressman.
Yeah, I think Michael brings up a really good point on the NRA. One, which is they don't represent gun owners; they represent gun manufacturers, right, where the money really is. And two, and a point that I should have brought up, and Michael, thank you for bringing it up, is this is a partisan organization. I mean, they find a couple token Democrats that they throw a few nickels at, but in general, they'll be complicit with whatever the GOP agenda is. So you're right. They didn't point out someone who, was saying that they had a gun, and they don't then defend wherever you would be defending a gun owner if they really were an organization of people around gun rights, but instead they're going to be complicit with the GOP agenda and then advocate for what they advocate for, which is the gun manufacturers. And I think we just have to make sure everyone understands the NRA needs to be a stamp that makes you vote against someone, not for someone.
Amen. Ed in Riverside, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. This is Ed Crow. I went to Vietnam in 1965 on a ship. And when we got there, I didn't go to a port. I got into a landing craft, and I hit the beach. Now, I look at Puerto Rico, and everything is going through one port. Why can't we get supplies? I mean, the island's only 100 miles long and 30 miles wide. We could put stuff all around that island for people to get. What's going on? Why does everything have to go through one port?
Yeah. So, Ed, I mean, I think part of why is just because that's the easiest place to get things off of a boat to get access. Part of the problem we've had is the roads were blocking some of the access because we haven't sent people, and we haven't, in time. Now we have sent far more people, and they're doing, I think, the job they can do the best they can on the ground. But, look how long this response took from this president. And the fact that he was there throwing paper towels at people yesterday, I mean, Tom, you can't – SNL is like, damn, why didn't we think of that?
I'm wondering if that's the brand that's made by Koch Industries. What is it, Brawny, I think?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be a commercial interest as he's throwing paper towels at people, which was just, again, a surreal scene. But, Ed, I think the point is we needed to have more people there much sooner to help people. The fact that he was telling people to turn off their flashlights because they have electricity, I think 90+% of the island still doesn't have electricity. Right. This is a president who doesn't get it, and he did what he thought he had to do by showing up, throwing paper towels, and now he's off to Las Vegas. And, we need to have a real response to Puerto Rico, including dealing with the debt issue. Yeah,
maybe in Vegas he'll throw some silencers. John in Danbury, Connecticut. Hey, John, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi. Just had a thought here. I talked to you about this a couple of years ago, Tom, on the radio. But all these shootings are always, as far as I know, committed by men. Women don't buy assault rifles and go out and massacre groups of people. I don't know why. I don't know what the answer is.
Kind of blows up Freud's theory of penis envy. But clearly some men are tortured by that. Did you have a question there, or did you just want to get the congressman's thoughts on that statement?
I just wanted to, like I said, I don't know what you could do about it. I just think it's interesting. To me, it's interesting. It popped up in my head a couple of years ago. I was listening to this and thinking, why don't women do this? I'm glad they don't, but women don't do it. Women don't seem to feel the need. So,
Congressman, is testosterone the most dangerous drug on earth?
Yeah, I'll tell you, John. I mean, it's a good observation, and again, I think what we need to do is when you have a moment like this, while the Republicans will say, look, he had background checks, they'll give you all the reasons why you can't do something. We need to use this as the reminder of what we haven't done and what we can get done. And there are some really easy, non-heavy lift things that the public supports that we need to get done unless we're too busy representing the NRA and not the American people. And I'm just hoping this is a wake-up call, but honestly, I thought a year ago Pulse was the wake-up call, and then a year later now we've got the newest, largest massacre. People have to start making this an issue when they decide if they're voting for someone.
Yeah. Joel in Northbrook, Illinois, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, just fine.
Thank you. Congressman and Tom, terrible performance of this administration. The Democrats could look forward to taking back the Congress next election and the presidency. But looming ahead is that double-edged sword of unjust voter ID and cross-check. What is being done about cross-check? I'll listen to your answer.
Sure, Joel. Thanks for your call. So let me say a couple things. One, we have a bill called the SAFE Act that would deal with cross-check. Thanks to listeners on the show bringing it up, we've drafted something that will deal with that, as well as things like paper ballots and audits of elections, so you can disincentivize anyone to try to impact those. We've got a number of actually pieces of legislation that Democrats have put out there in general. Just with this Congress, they're not going to get the hearing. So again, we have to elevate that by contacting members of Congress, asking people to sign on to things. Also yesterday, Tom, and I kind of failed to mention this in the beginning, interesting from my perspective of being from Wisconsin, Supreme Court heard a case around redistricting, and that could have some national impacts. And that's another problem, is gerrymandering is where politicians pick their voters as opposed to voters picking their elected officials. That's another issue we have to kind of deal with, or else you're going to continue having the Tea Party and the NRA and all the rest of the folks running this place.
Yeah. There was one witness yesterday that Alito was questioning, and Alito completely misrepresented what this guy had written. Oh, it's a whole long story, but it was really clear that Alito was using basically fake news yesterday. But that's all, Anyhow, let's see here. Steve in Perrysville, Indiana. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I think that everybody, I know there's over, 70% of the people in the country are against, they want laws for guns and stuff, gun control. I think everybody should get on the phone and call their representatives and senators and tell them, if you don't vote for something to take care of the gun control and stuff, then by God, you aren't going to be back in office the next time.
Yeah, Steve, great suggestion. Also, I would argue, call people in your state legislature and your local government where maybe they can still do positive things and have them enact some proactive legislation as well. We don't just have to wait for the federal government or in some states, state government to act when they may not. We can still impact things locally, and we need to do that on a variety of issues.
Jim in Minneapolis, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, my name is Jim. One thing, Tom, I just wanted to say I grew up in Michigan and went to Michigan State, so I always enjoy your references to Lansing, East Lansing.
Well, thank you.
Another thing I wanted to say is the idea of American exceptionalism. When something happens like Las Vegas, you wonder, there's one thing we're number one at, but certainly nothing to be proud of. but whatever. My real question is about health care. As a liberal, I'm certainly in favor of single payer, but my question is, all my conservative friends say, how would we pay for it? And I wonder, in the countries in Europe especially that have single payer, do the corporations contribute at all to that? Because for most of us, our health care, all of my life, my health care has come from my employer. And so it's hard to figure out how we would fund single payer if we're taking the responsibility away from the corporations. Is there an answer to that?
Yeah, Tom, what might be interesting sometimes,
Thank you, Jim.
we just take 10 minutes, and because I think this is a good point that's come up a few times.
Mm-hmm.
They put out the misinformation about something like single payer or Medicare for all, and yet as we've had these discussions, there's a lot of savings by getting rid of the overhead and administration and a lot of other aspects of it.
Right.
And this is done.
So it's really not even a question of how do you pay for it. It's what are you going to do with the extra money you'll have left over.
Exactly. And I think if we could actually just offer that so people would have that to give pushback, it would be really helpful, because there are solid economic studies that show that there's not like a pay for on it at all. In fact, it's the savings go back into providing health care, and you can make sure every single person is covered. All you've done is take out maybe some of the middle people along the way.
Right, right. But to the specifics of it, most, from speaking to Canadians specifically, their healthcare system is funded in part by individual income taxes, in part by corporate income taxes, and in part by a monthly contribution of about $140 or $200, something like that, that the typical Canadian family makes, like with regular Medicare. I believe that that's how it works, and I'm assuming that you're envisioning, or progressives are envisioning something similar to that for a single-payer system in the United States.
Well, I mean, there's a million, honestly, different ways you could almost chop it up and how you do it. So I don't think that – I think the bigger question is it something you're paying extra for, or is it in reality something you're going to have savings of, which is the reality, and that's how we need to express that. How exactly that's chopped up versus paying for schools versus paying for the military are kind of particularized details.
Yeah, okay, got it.